I can feel it. It's coming. The great jumping of Jujutsu Kaisen. Thank you to our fellow patrons Redwolf4765, Midnight Gemlord, and Sean. And a big thank you to our $3 members, Recliner Plays and Redwolf4765. And a very big thank you to our $25 patron, Alex Ice Rose. And another very big thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. Now, before we hop into this breakdown / review of chapter 220 of Jujutsu Kaisen, please don't forget to leave your comments on the chapter in the comment section down below, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also make sure that little notification so miss out on any videos that come with the channel. Also I do a Patreon below, each more as low as $1 a month, exclusive videos, early content, and more. You can also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, let's hop into the review. What's up guys, welcome to and here we are to review chapter 220 of Jujutsu Kaisen, which is known as Self-Cleansing and Self-Restraint. And shoutouts to Gege, they actually gave us a new chapter title, but I guess they couldn't call this bath anymore, right? Because as I predicted, we did cut away this chapter, though admittedly we cut away in like more ways than one. Like Elijah Wilkers, Gege, you really said forget this, we are ending this year. I suppose this is what this is implying to me, at least. However, let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into the chapter itself. So we open up and we do get to see a very peculiar image. Even on the title page itself, it reads, "The prison realm. It contains the strongest and is currently sleeping somewhere." Somewhere is interesting, like, I can't exactly tell where it is, but the prison realm being asleep somewhere, even though its eyes are wide open, is very, very interesting. I once again wonder what Gojo's been doing in there. Like, we know that unfortunately he can move, which means bro's been in like legitimate stasis for what? 2 weeks? I believe it's November. Hold on, let me double check. What time is it? What time is it in the chapter? November 18th. So he's been in there since October 31st. So he's been stuck with nothing but skeletons for the past 2 weeks and 4 days. Fully able to move, fully able to breathe, eat, sleep, all that, but like alone with nothing but skeletons for 18 days straight. That's a little bit concerning. I bet he is starving. I do believe he doesn't actually need to eat anymore. I think his body with its RCT just automatically keeps himself in top condition regardless of eating. I think he just sleeps for fun now. But regardless, still, the fact that he's been alone and possibly conscious for the past 18 days with nothing but himself, his thoughts, and his guilt. Let's just say when he comes out the box, it may just get tragic and pneumatic. However, we do get to see also on this cover page that there is a certain player with 309 points, and it is Suguru Geto. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. I'm excited to see where this goes, so I wonder where it will go. However, we do get to see that Kenjaku is playing absolutely 0 games. They pull up and then like, I've been cooking for 1,000 years, so let me chef it up real quick. Kogane, add a new rule. Prohibit the entry of new players into the culling game. Rejected. Wait, what would Kogane's voice be? Specifically this Kogane. I like to assume all the Kogane have different voices that more match their wielders or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure what this, because it looks weird. It almost looks grandma-esque, but it has Kenjaku's signature scarring. So would it be rejected? It infringes on Rule 7. I cannot let you do that. Rejected. It infringes on Rule 7. In order to suppress the... Okay, so interesting. Once again, it is established here that Geto, Suguru Geto, and obviously Kenjaku through Suguru Geto's body, is still limited to the rules of the culling game. Notably, this was established. He said himself a while ago that he was not the game master. He was just kind of chilling, and he had structured the game specifically enough that there would be a bug in place. Like, remember a couple chapters back when he was talking with Oraume, he was explaining like, oh yeah, even though the culling game, as crazy as it was, required a binding vow that would go on forever, I kind of built in a bug or two in there that would allow me to end it. And also, if you go even further back than that, when the military was arriving, he was explaining to Oraume, it also was established that as long as you ignore the Kogane's call, then you aren't properly instated in the culling game. You don't have to go through the teleportation stuff like that. So it's a double entendre. Kenjaku's really revealing that he's built in all these bugs and holes and loopholes himself so he can manipulate the game. And I really, really like that. Once again, Kenjaku is... like, there's one other major character that's a massive spoiler that I would say is in contention for, like, the new gen Aizen. But specifically, like, I mean, guess you could technically argue too. But yeah, you could argue a certain character from another popular series that happens to be in the Dark Trio that I also happen to review every single time it drops. Like, that also has a character that could be argued as like the new gen Aizen of sorts. But like, in terms of like planning for every contingency, preparing everything in a certain way, controlling the main character's life, cooking for the past 1,000 years or so, like realistically, it is Kenny. Like, arguably enough, I believe Aizen wasn't even born 1,000 years ago in terms of like the 1,000-year Blood War stuff. He wasn't born until after that. So realistically, Kenny's actually been around longer and has been plotting longer than Aizen has. So it's really nice to see. I love smart villains. I love villains that are like just actually intelligent and use their intelligence to their advantage. Kenny built the game, so he built these loopholes in so he could abuse them. Could anyone abuse them if they found it? Yeah, but no one's as smart as Kenny. No one would be able to manipulate the game in the way that Kenny does, and I really, really like that. It's great. And we see with the Kogane obviously arguing against the idea of like, yeah, dude, I can't not, like, we cannot do that. We cannot allow people to stop coming into the culling game because the culling game relies on people consistently coming in. So that's a no-go, buddy. It conflicts with Rule 7. You see Kenny's like, okay, so you are something of a puppet, but I can logic this out for you if you really need me to. If you really think I'm not like that, let me tell you something. In order to suppress the outbreak of curses in Japan, Tengen had erected several purification barriers to support the efficiency of barrier techniques. Among these, 4 are vital. One that surrounds the Imperial Palace at its center, one around the Tomb of the Star under Jujutsu High. This was one candidate site when the capital was moved to Tokyo, one in Kyoto around the Yamakuni Imperial Mausoleum, and finally the one here, dividing Japan into East and West, the Hida Holy Mountain Purification Barrier. The culling games uses a Brahmic barrier that was created using Tengen's purification barriers as its base. The culling game has no true game master. If I had to choose one, it wouldn't be me or you, it would be Tengen. But of course, this was all my own design. Listen here. If he deactivated these 4 barriers after the Shibuya incident, the culling game would have come to an end and all plans of mine would have gone up in smoke. However, that would have to involve undoing 1,000 years of progress in the endless war against the curses, along with barrier technique know-how. Essentially, it would have countless, almost thousands upon thousands of human casualties. So instead, Tengen decided that it would bet it all on them coming out victorious against me and my allies. As a result, that same Tengen is now in the palm of my hand. As the original creator of the barrier, it should be no problem destroying it. Kogane, add a new rule to prohibit the entry of new players into the culling game. Otherwise, I will destroy this purification barrier and force the culling game to end. Now, I did a whole ton of voice acting right there because I kind of just had to talk for a little bit, but a couple things. This is something that was established a while ago when it comes to Tengen. Like, the idea that they are the essential backbone of Jujutsu society as it is for the past 1,000 years is something that is established way back when. That is why the Star Plasma Vessel being brought to Tengen so it could continue to merge and not evolve was super duper important, because if Tengen were to ever perish or cease the living in any way, shape, or form, then Jujutsu as we knew it would pretty much fall apart. However, the interesting thing is that Kenjaku specifically mentions barriers to support the efficiency of barrier techniques. but only barrier techniques. I thought Tengen's barriers like reinforced all jujutsu, like made it so much stronger than it would be before, that hypothetically if those barriers were to go down, sorcerers who use jujutsu would be way weaker because the efficiency of their curse energy would be like undermined drastically. Honestly, if it works as Kenjaku describes it and people just couldn't use barriers anymore, I think that'd be fine. Like, I'm not exactly sure why Tengen wouldn't do that, because under the context, sure, people can't use domains anymore, but it's not like a Satoru Gojo would struggle without a domain. It's not like a Sukuna would struggle without a domain if it even cares about Sukuna, which it seems to be a fan of. It's not like Itadori would struggle without a domain. Like, you know what I'm saying here? Like, if it was just the loss of barrier techniques, I don't necessarily get it. I understand what Kenjaku brings up, the idea of Tengen doing this to avoid countless human casualties, but like, really though? Would there have really been countless human casualties if, you know, like, Tengen just let it drop? I presume this may just be a mistranslation thing where it just says barrier techniques. I'm assuming it's all techniques, because that makes more sense. Because if all sorcerers suddenly all just became Yuji, aka having no techniques at all, the Limitless would disappear, heck, the 10 Shadows technique would disappear, all the techniques would disappear, and thusly, like, then everything's going to be in chaos, because people are just going to have to literally throw hands with cursed spirits. And sure, they do that a lot already, but still, it would be a lot less effective than what they could do with their techniques. But with that being the case, it's interesting that Tengen could have, up until the very last moment when they were about to be turned into one of Kenny's victims, that they didn't. Once again, I do believe this kind of feeds into the idea that Tengen was never, ever on the side of our protagonist. Like, it was literally just all a joke, a funny hee ha, like, oop, you thought I was your ally, joke's on you, I'm quite literally the exact opposite. Like, presumably based on how casual Tengen was about the defeat of Yuki and the escape of Choso, it appears that this just flat out confirms that Tengen was sort of in on this plan, which is very interesting to me. I wonder why, right? Because, like, presumably they have no reason. Like, if we go with the idea that Kenjaku mentions here at face value, that for some reason Tengen did not want massive human casualties by shutting down the barrier themselves to stop Kenjaku, why would they let themselves be absorbed and become a curse that Kenjaku can just use? I don't know. Maybe this, I assume it was just like a roundabout way to trick the heroes, right? Like being like, oh no, you know, I just really don't want massive human casualties, so I'm not going to shut down the barriers, even though I easily could. Ruh-roh. And then he was going to work with Kenjaku all along, but I'm not sure why. Like, we know Kenjaku refers to them as an old friend, so maybe this is just something they planned out 1,000 years ago, but I don't know. It seems very, very interesting. I wonder. There's such a mystery behind Tengen, but the rate the story's going, what this chapter ends up setting up, I highly doubt we're going to get any real elaboration on it. I think there's just going to be something that's lost to the void. Because Tengen, while being extremely important, they are the fundamental backbone to this entire section of the arc. They aren't like that important character-wise. I don't think Gege's going to suddenly explore the reasons why Tengen is aligning with Kenjaku in this sense, and being so casual about it. However, one thing I do admit that I really like the black sclera on Tengen. I'm not sure why, it levels up their design a whole lot for me. Like the 4-eye with the black sclera, it's really, really neat. I don't know why. It's not very different from their base design where they just have regular eyes, but like, I don't know. I think it's cool. Wait, maybe do they always have that? I don't think they always have that. Let me double check. Yeah, no, Tengen did not always have the black sclera. In fact, they didn't even have pupils at all before. So the black sclera with the pupils, I don't know. It's a really, really neat design to me. I like it a lot. However, with that being the case, they are aligning in this way. And we see, I mean, presumably maybe Tengen didn't want to align, but it's not like they have any choice in the matter. But I don't know, still seems so fishy. I need to talk about Tengen in their own video. But with that being the case, we do get to see that the Kogane tries to fight back still. It's like, but rule 7. And we see that Tengen's like, what are you playing at? Like, what's the point of all this? Why are you even going out of your way to do this? And Kenjaku's like, I'm putting a bug into the game on purpose. Regardless of what you choose, the game will no longer have any way to go on forever. Kogane, I know you'll choose the option that will sustain this game for as long as possible, as is your nature. So this rule will be approved. And we see that Kenny was right. A player has added a new rule to the culling games. Rule 13, entry of new players is closed from this moment onwards, November 18th, 2109, 2018. Crazy to think that this is like 5 years behind us now, but obviously JJK has been in publication for about 5 years now, if I'm not mistaken, so it makes sense why it's so far behind. With that being the case, there is an interesting idea here, the idea that the Kogane will break its own rules if it means sustaining the game as long as possible. So it knows, or like the fact that it could be reasoned with at all. Like hypothetically, if the Kogane were not like in some form sentient and capable of rational thought on their own individually, like it just wouldn't be able to do this. Like it wouldn't be able to override its own rules. Kenny would have to be forced to break the game himself, like legitimately turn the game off through the shutting down of the purification barriers. But no, the Kogane is sentient enough to like react, think, realize that, okay, if he shuts down the barriers now, the game will end. But hypothetically, if we add this rule, even though it contradicts rule 7, the game would still go on. So I gotta do it. Like, I like that. I don't know. It's an interesting layer to the Kogane. Obviously, they're literally just living, walking, talking, flying plot devices. But still, I like my plot devices when they have a little bit of sentience to them. And we do get to see that Kenny doesn't stop there with the rule addition. Kenny goes on to say, add an additional rule. When all players other than Geto Suguru and Fushiguro Megami have perished, the culling game will come to an end. Do it or else. And we see that the Kogane has absolutely no problem with this, as it immediately says a player has added a new rule to the culling games, rule 14. And this is interesting. Kenjaku specifically said until he and Sukuna are defeated or have perished, then the culling game may come to an end. He doesn't just say himself, which implies that he believes that he couldn't beat Sukuna right now. Like, presumably, I wonder what would have happened if he added the rule and just said himself. Like, hypothetically, he could do it, but presumably, I mean, I guess maybe even if Sukuna wouldn't immediately attack him for that, because like, oh, hey, what the heck you doing, dude? Fine. If you perish, then this ends. I'll do it right now. We still don't know the full nature of their alliance. But with that being the case, it's interesting to see that Kenny goes out of their way to lock off this idea to like everyone else needs to perish except for me and Sukuna. So once they get to that point, I wonder, like, Kenny's obviously going to do the merger, but would Sukuna fall under the parameters of the merger? Maybe not. I don't know. Because like with the idea of the culling games, being the culling games, presumably all the people who perish at the hands of Kenny or Sukuna would not be viable for the fusion anymore. So wouldn't their cursed energy kind of be lost? But I guess that's kind of the point, because it's just supposed, yeah, I guess that makes sense, because it's just supposed to be a massive conglomeration. All the cursed energy in Japan given form. So I guess it makes sense, but like, I wonder, what is Sukuna going to do like after that's done? Because presumably, I guess they could just rule over the new world over Kenjaku, or like alongside Kenjaku. I don't know. Like, what is Sukuna's end game, I suppose? Like, hypothetically, I mean, he could go to other nations, but hypothetically, if the merger, if Kenjaku's plan were to succeed, he wouldn't have anybody to eat. Like, there would be no cooking, even Uraume, unless they like cooked themselves and kept regenerating with RCT. Like, there's absolutely nothing they could really do about that anymore, because all the humans would be gone. So like, would it just be Kenny versus Sukuna in the very end? I have no idea, but it's interesting that Kenny set it up like this, to where essentially he's drawing all the ire of the remaining players, known or unknown, which realistically should not be a problem for either of them. Like, even with the massive jump that's set up at the end of this chapter, without a certain someone being let out of the prison realm, I don't see anyone really challenging either of these two. Yes, that includes Yuta, Hakari, all of them, even if they were at the peak of their power, mainly because Kenjaku has like an infinite arsenal now that should go pretty much uncontested, even with the special grades there, because, he's Kenjaku, and plus he still has his barrierless domain, which no one in the series so far has shown a decent enough counter to, or at least no one in our cast that isn't Gojo has shown a decent enough counter to a barrierless domain that I don't think Kenny could just pop that open on him and they wouldn't all immediately perish. And Sukuna is Sukuna. Like, they need to get through Maharaga first. They need to get through Piercing Bull first. They need to get through every single one of his Shikigami first, and then they need to get through Malevolent Shrine. Two of those things are not happening, so To be fair, there's no reason for them to be scared of drawing all the ire of all the players, but I'm definitely intrigued to see how both of their endgames interact. Like, would Sukuna really be down with losing all of his food forever, essentially? Because I'm not sure what Kenny plans to do with the massive curse conglomerate, but probably not anything fun. And two, I wonder if Kenny would like Sukuna to be around. Because sure, they seem to be on neutral enough terms, but that's the thing, it's only neutral. They aren't necessarily friendly or anything like that, so I wonder what they would do in this new world of cursed chaos, if you will. However, with that being the case, we do get to see that Tengen's still pretty much intrigued about Kenjaku's whole motive and line of planning here. Tengen, still a sentient creature, which is very interesting. Presumably this is Kenjaku doing this out of mercy for their friend, but Tengen still is sentient enough to act in their own way. They ask, "Why go about this in such a roundabout manner? If what you need is for the killing game to end, why didn't you simply extinguish this purification barrier alone? That would preserve the other ones, meaning barrier techniques would still be amplified and cursed energy and manipulation of it as we know it would not be overridden, but at the same time the killing game would end." And we see that Kenjaku responds with, "If I did that, the testing ground for the great merger with you would also disappear." Very, very interesting. So this great merger is still meant to be with Tengen. Like, this merger is meant to pretty much have Tengen as the basis of it. So maybe this is why Tengen aligned with Kenjaku, simply to become an almighty being. Because essentially, what else would they be? Like, other than Sukuna and Kenny themselves, like, give someone all the cursed energy that was pretty much being laid and grown and revived within Japan for the last 1,000 years. Characters like Kashimo, Ryu, Uro, heck, even Yorozu and other characters of their ilk, on top of the characters like Yuta, Hakari, heck, even Itadori at this point. All these characters with this extreme amount of cursed energy. Imagine a composite version of that. So maybe Tengen did this with the hope of becoming an almighty creature? I don't know. The next king of curses, maybe, like Sukuna. Like, we know that apparently, according to Kenjaku, Tengen's face is, or their evolved face is pretty much modeled off of Sukuna. So maybe this is it, but still, I wonder what would lead to such power hunger. I mean, unless, people are just power hungry, which, people can be. So maybe it's not too shocking. However, it's very interesting that Kenny is willing to do this with Tengen and not, like, themselves. I guess because they wish to observe it, but, like, I don't know. I wouldn't want to imbue someone, even that I trusted, with what would literally be a deific power. Like, if I had the choice to either A, make myself a deity, B, make no one a deity, or C, make my best homie a deity, I'd probably go with B, because I wouldn't want to be a deity either, but I wouldn't go with C, because, that much power could drive any man insane. And sure, Tengen's evolved beyond humanity, but probably not far enough for it to actually be worth anything in terms of allowing them to become a straight-up deity. But speaking of straight-up deities, we do get to see that they walk upon a certain thing within this barrier, and it is the ancient body of the king of curses, Sukuna himself. They find the husk, and we see that Kenny actually brings up something interesting. "I'll take this as a souvenir to Sukuna. That's fine with you, right?" "Yeah, it isn't needed to keep the purification barrier up." So interesting. Sukuna's original body is here. And I think this does kind of confirm that Sukuna just did it himself. A later point in the chapter also confirms that. But it appears that Sukuna just did it himself in terms of figuring out how to, or not even figuring out, just he didn't lose. He never lost in the past. I thought, maybe I just misremembered that story, but I thought the ancient sorcerers of the past all came together and subdued Sukuna. It's just that they couldn't, like, properly exorcise him completely once he became a curse, and he was sealed within the cursed objects. But no, based on what the chapter implies later and the remaining husk here, they couldn't even destroy the remains of Sukuna. Like, his flesh and blood body, the husk of what once was, is still there. And notably, this is a cursed husk. And usually once curses perish, they, like, turn to dust. But no, Sukuna's actual body still exists. I wonder if this has something to do with the fact that he was once human before, and he, like, evolved into a curse in a similar vein to something like Tengen. So would Tengen's body linger around if he perished? I don't know. And notably, Tengen is described as he, despite them admitting in the past that they would be classified as a grandma. Interesting. But overall, I wonder if this shall have any significance. Will Sukuna eat his old self? Is this how he would get back to like the four-armed beefy boy version he was 1,000 years ago? I honestly don't have the faintest idea, but it's interesting that they stumble upon this corpse and that Kenny's able to take it. And I wonder, I mean, it would be highly unlikely. It is a corpse. The body is probably long rotten, even though it still exists. But like, could Kenny possess this? Could he take it over? Could he revitalize it if he were to put his brain in? I have no idea. I don't think so. I think he would need the body to at least be a living one. But then again, he managed to take over and completely heal up Ghetto's body, which was like missing an entire arm and half the face was charred off. So like, maybe he could just revive. But regardless, it seems like he's taking it as a souvenir to Sukuna. So I wonder what Sukuna's going to do with it. Is he just going to have Urume cook it? Like, would you eat... If you were to reincarnate in a new body, what would you do with your old one if it was still just there? Like, say 1,000 years from now, like, technology has advanced so far that they literally just print a copy of you and your consciousness, and they, like, show you, oh yeah, we kept your, like, original remains and stuff like that, like, it's still there. I mean, I kind of just leave it. Like, I don't think I would interact with it much, like, if I had a new body, but... I'd probably visit it every once in a while to just look at what I was, but I'm not sure what Sukuna's going to do with it, because he's cool, but he's kind of a weirdo. But speaking of weirdos, we do cut to one of the ultimate weirdos in all of JJK, and it is Ui, who says, with this, if Kenjaku eradicates all other players with the exception of Sukuna, he can end the culling games. And we see that Maki, who has changed clothes, you know, gotta keep swapping out the fits, can't stay. You must always be drippy in JJK. You must never not be drippy. She says, that is most likely the condition for the merger with Tengen. Now things have become quite simple. There's no need to ponder about this and that whilst fighting. Oh, no, that's Ui. Now things have become quite simple. There's no need to ponder about this and that whilst fighting. Yeah. If we beat both Kenjaku and Sukuna, it'd be our victory. And that's what Maki says. And as Uiui points out, that's easier said than done. And they make a pretty apt comparison where Uiui says, it'd be about as hard as slaying Satoru Gojo. And that is true. Notably, even with their squad setup, which we'll get into in a little bit. I don't think it's feasible without the help of the strongest. Unfortunately, as the chapter themselves mentioned, the strongest is still lying in wait. I think they definitely need his help at this point, because just with how strong Sukuna has revealed himself to be, and we know that Sukuna still hasn't revealed everything, and likely the same cases with Kenny, where we don't know if Kenny's shown everything that they have in their back pocket yet, plus whatever new abilities that they have from all the other curses they haven't shown, or any extra abilities they have held over from previous bodies. Like, obviously Kenny's also in a really weird spot, so I do think they need the extra help. And it is great to see, though, that now that the game has been simplified, they really can just lock in. They can lock in and just buckle down to get ready for the final battle. At first, I didn't think JJK would be able to end this year, but now, yeah, if Gojo presumably comes back in next chapter or the chapter after that, which seems to be implied by this chapter, I think we can end this year. It's crazy to think about, and I kind of feel stupid for not expecting Gege to be able to end it this year, but yeah, especially considering what Maki says here, that very same Gojo Satoru is going to make a comeback. Yeah, they're gonna do it, and I'm really, really excited to see it. I'm super excited to see what's gonna happen here. However, we do get to see that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because the person who's going to free Satoru Gojo cannot be in battle anymore, because someone says, my apologies, this was the best I could do with my reverse curse technique. And we see that the angel declares, no, this is plenty. I would have perished instantaneously. And this is kind of sad, I'm not gonna lie, but we got back to the great fall that the angel / Hana took after getting by Maguna, and we see that a certain someone actually managed to catch them. And it was not Itadori, it was not Maki, it was not anyone of that sort. It was Amai. If not for Amai-kun cushioning my fall, and Takaba too, I can't put my finger on it, but I have a feeling he played a huge role in staying by my side, the angel would have perished and they would have lost their win con. So this is interesting. I one, Amai being there is neat enough. Like, don't get me wrong, it doesn't make sense that it's not like it's impossible that he wouldn't be there, but convenient timing. And two, it's nice that Takaba indirectly ended up being more useful than you would reasonably expect him to be as a joke character for the most part. Like, notably, we've all low-key been joking that Takaba's going to think it's funny that Gojo's out the box, and bada bing, bada boom, Gojo's out the box, or he's going to think it's funny that Kenjaku or Sukuna would immediately perish if they saw him, and bada bing, bada boom, Sukuna and Kenjaku immediately perish once they see him, because he does have, like, an all-powerful curse technique. But it's nice to see that even passively, his curse technique has a certain effect that will pretty much negate the ending of life as long as he's there. Like, presumably, Angel, who reveals that they do not have RCT, which is kind of whack. Like, how are you the Angel and you that powerful but don't have RCT? But with that being the case, it's revealed that Takaba sort of just negates, the ceasing of life as long as he's there. So essentially, unless they domain, which should shut down Takaba's comedian technique, they won't be able to actually execute anybody. So I think something's going to happen to Takaba. There's going to be some reason why he can't be there. Because if the comedian really won't allow red, which is what has been implied before, then we can't have a high stakes final battle. So yeah, Takaba's going to either like wake up late, not show up on time, something. He's going to have to swap places with Gojo or something like that. Like, there's no way Takaba's going to be able to stick around. Because the fact that he managed to keep Angel alive just by existing next to her is kind of crazy. Very, very crazy. Because that's all Angel said. It's not like they said, oh, Takaba healed me. Oh, Takaba stopped the pouring out of my life. No. Just by staying by Angel's side, Angel didn't end up perishing, which is crazy. Another thing that's crazy is that, Hana is just out of the narrative. But this is just definitively out of the narrative. Because Yuta says, sorry for being curt, but in order for us to proceed with our plans going forward, I must confirm something. And we see that Shoko just declares it. Karusu-san is currently not in any condition to participate in battle. That's... Notably, I do not believe Gege does not like writing women. I do not believe that. We have Maki. Maki is living, walking proof to the contrary. Even Shoko in this chapter is living, walking proof to the contrary. But, like, having Angel not even really get a proper fight, mainly, 5 pages of actually doing something, only to immediately slap them out of the narrative, is kind of whack. Like, especially since you do, I'm presuming, we'll talk about who appears later in this chapter and why, if they're able to fight still after what happened to them, Angel should be able to be healed just fine, especially considering their wounds should be more recent. I kind of don't like how they're being removed from the final battle. I get it. It probably would stack things too much in the protagonist's favor if they had a person who could negate curse techniques. And obviously, Yuta himself could probably just copy it. Once again, considering what Hana says, or the Angel says later on in the chapter, it's very likely that Yuta's going to observe it and, say, it's not your curse technique negation, it's our curse technique negation. But I do feel like it's kind of silly not adding Angel into the fight. This was a character that was hyped up for a long, long time. Obviously for the main purpose of releasing Gojo, which is something they say they're going to do. But I think seeing them fight alongside everybody else, using their curse technique in specific ways, getting more elaboration on it, would have been neat. I'm sad that they kind of got reduced to not even a full fight. Yuki getting dropped in her first fight is unfortunate, yeah, but at least she had a first fight. At least she had multiple chapters where she showed off and popped off. It was really about that life. Hana/Angel was hyped up a bunch and then got munched on. And now is absolutely useless in a combat scenario. In a battle manga. I'm not the biggest fan of that. Gege writes peak every week. Don't get me wrong. I still think the chapter's peak. I'm still happy that Angel's going to be able to do something. But the fact that they aren't going to be useful in battle, kind of wacky. Kind of silly, kind of goofy. I'm not the biggest fan of that in the slightest, and I really, really wish Gege decided to go down a different route with that. However, and I'm not sure, we don't see, yeah, I think she has just permanently lost that arm, but why though? You're telling me Shoko and Yuta both together couldn't regenerate an arm. Like, notably, we see that Ryu in the end of the fight with, or the end of the Sendai Massacre, as I've come to call it. At the end of the Sendai Massacre, we see that Ryu's like, wow, it'd be quite a feat to grow an arm back with RCT, if she can even do RCT. Like, that's what Ryu says. But, like, we have one dude here with Boundless Curse Energy plus Rika, and then we have Shoko, who's a master RCT user on other people. You're telling me neither of them could regenerate a limb? Really? Like, we know Sukuna can too, but we know Yuta can regrow body parts. Like, he's regrown his own hand, regrown his own internal organs after they've been damaged. Like, bro has done insane feats of regen on his own. But you're telling me they couldn't bring back Hana's arm? Really? Once again, this is the same thing with, like, the Takaba stuff that I mentioned earlier. I do think this is literally just a balancing metric, because having Takaba and Yuta and Hikari and Gojo and the Amai and Itadori and everyone else, plus someone who can negate the curse techniques of the opponents, yeah, it would be a lot. And plus, Hana/Angel isn't really that important, but still, I really wish they were capable of fighting, especially considering we know that healing an arm or something like that shouldn't be too bad. And we see that Yuta asks, Angel, are you able to transfer to other human vessels like Sukuna? And we see that Angel says, simply put, it is impossible. The reason I and many other sorcerers from the ancient times took Kenjaku up on his offer was probably because, or precisely because, none of us knew how to become cursed items after the end of our lives. The fact remains true to this very day. However, the Fallen is different. After experiencing the ceasing of life once, he most likely stumbled onto a way to split his soul as cursed items. And with that being the case, yeah, Angel is entirely removed from the narrative. Trust me, I do get it. It's a balancing act thing. Gege is very specific. Like, they are pretty much a power scaler a lot of the time. Like, they have a lot of statements that are definitively power scaling based. Like, they aren't like a Nakaba or a, like, Horikoshi, two mangaka whose mangas are based around battle, but they are extremely vague with where characters scale. No, Gege is, like, giving us multiple implications. Like, oh yeah, Hanami is more durable than Jogo, but Jogo would one-shot him. Like, elemental matchups and stuff like that. Like, we've gotten a whole bunch of statements from Gege. Even, like, the Jackpot Hikari stuff like that. Like, Gege goes out of their way to scale and power balance certain things and power scale and stuff like that. So I'm assuming this is once again just a power balancing thing. And we do get to see that Yuta, who even looks a bit insulted by this, is like, oh, well, in that case. And Hana cuts him off and says, yes, my role ends once I dispel the seal on Gojo Satoru. And Megami, what will happen to him? So, essentially, Hana's role is done after she opens the prison realm, which is good. She can still open the prison realm, which is great. We're going to get Gojo back, presumably next chapter or the chapter after that. Wonderful. Excited for that. But Megami's done, son. Like, you should have just not fallen for it. It's crazy. Once again, there's so many... Sukuna's plan and, like, its success was contingent on so many factors that just shouldn't have worked out in his favor. The binding vow shouldn't have worked out. Like, the non-violence one shouldn't have worked. He harmed Hana. I'm sorry, you cannot knock somebody out without hurting them. I just refuse to believe that. I know my martial arts experts in the comments are reaching through the screen to try and strangle me, but I just don't buy that. Top that off with the idea that he was able to harm himself and, like, not face any repercussions from the binding vow also seems kind of dumb. And on top of that, Hana was forced to be really, really stupid and fall for obvious Sukuna play. I get it, we need it to happen, but that is my one issue with the whole thing. I'm loving the Sukuna twist. I'm glad he's in Megami now. It adds much more dimensions to the narrative and gives some cool new abilities, but still, I think the contrivances that had to happen for it to occur are kind of forced and kind of stupid. But now the deal is done. And we cut over to Amai, who says, I always despise myself. I'm always on the lookout for how guys stronger than me are feeling. And it's kind of like the way you try to match the timing of a rhythm game. I'd shamelessly cough up words that would please them. I've always had garbage talent like that. Usually I would get my life and the dookie beat out of me right afterwards, but I deserved it. I was so terrified of you, Itadori, that I would have run away and left everyone else behind in a heartbeat. I was even more terrified of the culling games. But even then, using my useless talent, I willed my way into being a lackey for the strong. I wanted to change, and I wanted to follow and fight alongside you, but I just didn't have the courage. Or maybe it's actually pride I lack. Sorry, that's the end of my rambling. Anyway, I just wanted to apologize. And that's nice. You know, Amai is a character who was introduced at the start of Tokyo Colony 1 or 2, I do believe, and he was fine. Like, not a character that really stuck with me, but I like the little extra development here, explaining, like, the need of the weak to follow the strong. It's something that is a major theme of JJK, and it's always great to see that being expressed with multiple characters. And we do get to see that with that being the case, Yuji's like, hey, dude, let me level with you real quick. I don't even have a clue of what kind of person you are. All I know is what you've done and the results of those actions. Because of you, Kurusu was saved. Thanks. By the way, don't worry. We haven't lost yet. And once again, I love Itadori. I will admit I am kind of sad that none of the damage that Sukuna did to him actually got to stick. I was hoping he'd get like 1 or 2 extra scars, but you know, he just has the main ones for Mahito. And I do like that, right? Like, it's Yuji, a character who has been so focused on the ideas of consequences of actions, right? Like, the whole Higuruma fight was discussing the idea of the actions that Itadori has undertook and what that means to him as a character, the ramifications it has. And Itadori seeing someone who, like him, was once blaming themselves for their sense of inability, their weakness, he comforts them. He comforts them in the idea that they did something useful. They did something that will save a bunch of lives. They did something that cannot be taken away from them. The value of who they are will not be determined by what they've done in the past, but what ramifications their actions in the past have upon them now. And I like that. Itadori, once again, kind of like how I say JJK is solidly my favorite new gen, and arguably the best. I know the Chainsaw Man fans are gonna come out the woodwork, but still, even with that, I can also say that Itadori is up there pretty much as the best new gen MC to me. Once again, I just love his development, his story, the understanding of himself as a person. I'm very excited to see where Gege takes him in this final battle. And we do get to see that Amai is like, wait a minute. I heard that Sukuna no longer dwells within you. So why are you still fighting? That's a good question. Why still put yourself at risk? And it's because the whole world is at stake, bro. Like, it's not like he can just run away and hide. But still, with that being the case, we do get to see that Itadori's like, that doesn't change anything. We were never really working together in the first place. Ieri-san said the current me is like a cursed item that was soaked in the cursed energy known as Sukuna. So, as long as I can slay him, I'll lead anything. And that's interesting, right? So we know that Itadori still has some sort of remnants of Sukuna's presence, just no Sukuna. So kind of like, how do I put this? What's a good idea? So like, you know how if you, this is from an artist out there, if you ever drawn with like any sort of pencil and you've like you've leaned your hand on the piece of paper you're drawing with, typically you'll realize you accidentally smudged your art if you draw like I do. Like I draw and then I'll like move over. I won't draw like linearly from left to right, which typically you do with writing. And that smudge, that's essentially what Sukuna is. Like, you don't have like the whole hand in him anymore. It's not on top of Itadori anymore. But the smudge that Sukuna left on him is kind of permanent, so he is sort of just a cursed object, which is very interesting, a cursed item. So that means that Yuji technically has the full prowess and potential of Sukuna, or not the full prowess and potential, but the ability to use that remnant, use that smudge in order to become something greater. And presumably he says here that he would consume anything to become powerful enough to slay Sukuna. So what could that mean? I've seen discussion about what Choso says later on in the chapter to imply that Itadori ate the rest of the siblings, which may be possible, but I think due to the thing that Yuki mentioned way back when, talking about the technique limit that a human body could have, even though Itadori is technically a cursed item, he's still a human being. So I don't think he could absorb all their cursed techniques, but he may have eaten a couple of them. maybe a little bit, or he could have absorbed or eaten some of the remaining Sukuna fingers, because we still don't know where the last 5 are. Maguna is still only 15 finger. We have not seen a full power Maguna yet. So those fingers could either be being eaten by Maguna right now, or Itadori could eat them and use the imprint that he has and the fact that Sukuna has already rooted himself deeply within the soul of another to just get the raw power and the technique that's hidden within the fingers rather than dealing with Sukuna himself. It could make sense. We know that Sukuna had 4 bands on his wrists when he was in Itadori's body, and the bands have been theorized to signify the amount of curse techniques he has locked away. So hypothetically, these last 5 fingers could contain the final curse technique, but maybe. However, we do get to see an interesting gaggle of fiends here, and those are of various varieties and backgrounds. One, we have Kashimo. Kashimo is here, he is with us, and he's sort of just moping over in the corner. Interesting. I thought he wasn't going to be here. I thought he and Akari would immediately like go and run up on Sukuna or something like that by their deal, but it seems like Kashimo's chill enough that he just wanted to stand around and chill out and wait. I do definitely want to see him interact with some characters before he gets, jobbed, because it's going to happen. I'm sorry, there's still no way that Kashimo's going to survive this. But with that being the case, I do want to see him like interact with mainly characters like Maki, another smoke demon, characters like Yuta, his hypothetical possible opponent that he could have ran into, heck, even characters like Miwa, because they both have blue hair. Speaking of Miwa, Miwa's here too. We still don't have a reason why she was wandering around Sendai. Like, we just don't have any sort of clue behind that. I mean, I guess it's fine. It's not like we need an explanation of why she was there, but it would have been nice to have one, but she is just here. She probably souls the verse, but who knows? We'll never get to see it, because, Gege can never reveal the truth of Miwa and her real power. And she's with Momo. Momo, cannon fodder, there's like nothing that she's going to be able to do. But another interesting sight here is, no, I'm kidding. It's Akari and Kirara. Kirara, once again, not very powerful at all. Couldn't even beat, like, what? Regular Megami pre-Culling Games, any Culling Games training or amps that he got from that. She couldn't beat him then. Highly doubt she's going to be able to do anything now. But the main interest here is Akari. Mainly because I can't see his darn hands. Like, does he have both arms back? Because if he doesn't, he's useless. I'm sorry to say it, but jackpot, or no, a Akari-less jackpot. Akari who cannot open domain is worthless. So, like, I presume that he got his arm back, right? Because it doesn't seem like he's not going to be included in this final bout. So if you could get Hakari's arm back after it was already, like, stumped, like, legitimately stumped in the battle with Kashimo, then you're telling me you couldn't get Hana's arm back? Like, really gay? Like, maybe he's just missing an arm, but even then, Hakari missing an arm is actually useless, so I don't know why they would keep him around. I don't know, but then again, we do have a literal Momo here, so maybe a one-armed Akari is actually kind of useful. Another person we see here is Choso, and we see that Itadori walks up to this massive group meeting, and he says, "Hey, I have a few suggestions about how we can save Fushiguro." And we see that Yuta's like, "Same here, but..." And Maki interrupts, "In the end, unless we are able to corner Sukuna and render him unfit for battle, those suggestions are moot." Which essentially means that, yeah, Megami is essentially a lost cause. Like, he's just a sunk cost at this point. There's going to be no saving him. And unless they can literally confirm for a fact that Sukuna's down for the count, and there's some way that they could interact with the soul of Megami, yeah, they're aiming for the execution, which is good, Hypothetically, we have no idea what would happen if Maki attempted to act or attack against Sukuna or Maguna with Soul Liberation because of the whole two souls thing. Maybe it bolsters the durability, maybe she would just hurt Fushiguro, maybe she would just hurt Sukuna. There's no real idea about that, but it is good to see that everyone's going in there with a sort of executioner's intent. There's going to be no suppression or anything like that. They're going to be heading all out for it. And we do get to see, speaking of the soul, that Choso brings up a book, and he says, "Yuji, take this." And Itadori's like, "What's that?" And we see that Choso explains, the back of the prison row and Tsukumo's research records about the soul were entrusted to me. And with that being the case, Choso's like, who knows, might come in handy. And we see that Itadori thanks him. And notably, I do think this is set up for saving Megami, because research about the soul could hypothetically have Yuji learn to interact with the soul even without Sukuna's influence there. Because we gotta remember, the main reason Yuji was the natural predator to Mahito was because his body was wielding two souls at the time. And sure, while Yuji's body is imprinted, it still is left with the impact of Sukuna's cursed energy. It isn't perfect, I'd presume. Like, I don't think he has the remainders of Sukuna's soul living inside of him, so he shouldn't have like the soul attacking effect anymore. But with that being the case, if he could learn about the contours of the soul through Yuki's research, then maybe he could do that and find a way to like strike at Sukuna's soul exclusively in order to save Megami. But who knows? And we see as Yuji thanks him, Choso says, "It's okay." And Itadori's like, no, that's not it. It's about our siblings. And we see that Choso says, "It's fine, as long as they can go on living as a part of you." And notably, this is where the big debate comes from. People aren't sure if this is Yuji admitting that he ate the remaining siblings, the one that Choso said he was going to come back for, or if it's just talking about Eso and Kechizu. I cannot say his name. Eso and Kechizu, whatever. Pikachu. Eso and Pikachu. We aren't sure if they're talking about them living on through Itadori spiritually. I'm leaning more towards the latter because I don't think, I know Itadori literally says, "I would eat anything to slay Sukuna," but I don't think the weaker siblings, unless they had cracked curse techniques, would really be able to do anything. At best, Yuji would get some variation of blood manipulation, and I don't think that would do him any good in this context. And we do get to see that as everyone's talking together, once again, I do think Hikari has his arm back. I just can't tell because we don't see it. But with that being the case, actually, which arm did he lose? Did he lose the left arm or the right arm? I think he lost the left arm. Do we see his left arm at all in this chapter? I don't see it. No, wait a second. Hold on. Let me double check. I think he may have his arm back. So yeah, there's no reason Hana shouldn't be included in the battle. But regardless, let me double check. Yeah. So he did lose his left arm, but we do specifically see his left arm in his pocket. So Hikari's arm is back. So Yuta and Shoko could heal him, but they couldn't heal Hana? I find that suspicious. But regardless, we do get to see Shoko just lighten it up in the corner. And we see her flashing back to something that appears to happen after Volume 0, because Gojo's still wearing his bandages when he says this. "I will nurture them, strong and clever allies. Nobody will ever need to be alone again." Which is nice, you know? Obviously, Gojo feels alone at the pinnacle, so he doesn't want anyone else to feel the way he does. And we see that Shoko admits that even though maybe a part of her wanted to, she would never have fallen in love with either Gojo or Geto because she knew it would be a futile effort. And we see that Shoko feels actually a bit left out by Gojo when he thinks the loss of Geto makes him alone. But regardless, she does know, she does believe that in reality, there are many people awaiting the return of Gojo, and that it's time for him to finally come back. And chapter 220 ends there, and there's no break next week, so I do believe Father's coming home. However, there are some interesting characters we need to note here that do appear to, be relevant in this, or not relevant, but they're here to be fodderized, I presume. We do get to see that Mini Panda's here. He has gotten a little bit bigger, so it shows that time has passed since the fight between Hikari and Kashimo. But he's not going to be battle ready, presumably any near. Poor Panda, he's not going to be useful at all. We also have Inumaki back. He's still missing his arm, so he's also going to be useless. Like, we know he was struggling against Hanami. They're going to be fighting much higher than Hanami level threats. He's going to be useful against Kenjaku's curses, maybe. But some notable exceptions of characters who aren't here are big ones like Higuruma. Higuruma is still wandering about. They never found him. Hazanoki is another character who should still be alive, wandering about. They did not find him. That's unfortunate. He was decently powerful enough. And I say the biggest one, in terms of just like a raw power stat or raw addition, would be Uro. We know Ryu is in pieces, but Uro is still out and about as far as we know, yet she is not here, which is unfortunate. I think she would have been really useful, and it would have been really cool to see her fight again, even if, and like, you could have her overcome her fears of the King of Curses and the trauma she experienced. That would have been cool, but hey, we can take what we can get. So overall, super duper W chapter. As you can tell, I had a lot to talk about with this chapter. I'm excited for the next chapter. I think Gojo's finally coming back, and it seems like Gege's finally letting us breathe. However, that's what I think. Please what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure the notifications are set on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do Patreon below, each video as one, get them one down. Exclusive videos, early content, and more. Also, now become a member of the channel for as well as 3 years a month to get the same perks and more. Now, thank you so much for watching once again, and hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Takaba the Pencil, writing off.